Reagan Sternhardt is 21 years old and has been in recovery from substance use disorder since March of 2018. She attended the Pathway program in Temple, Arizona, then an IOP, and then spent 6 months in aftercare. She moved back to Mongolia and Texas in January 2019 and attends AA meetings regularly. She earned her GED and has graduated from Mongo Salon Academy, and she is now a certified recovery coach at Cornerstone of Houston. She works with teens who are struggling with substance use disorder and other mental health issues. She's also a student studying to become a licensed chemical dependency counselor. And her desire is to continue to work with kids and connect with them through her own personal struggles and offer them hope and understanding and to inspire them to live a beautiful life free of drugs and alcohol. Janelle Martin is Reagan's mom, and she's married with 2 kids, also living in Mongolia, Texas. Reagan is her youngest daughter who started using drugs at the age of 16. And because of this, Janelle found herself also in recovery in order to better understand and help her daughter. Her recovery consisted of weekly phone meetings with the counselor, weekly parent meetings, working a 12-step program, reading a multitude of books on addiction and recovery. She facilitates weekly PAL meetings, which is parents of addicted loved ones, in Cypress, Texas, at Cypress Therapy and Counseling. She works as a licensed chemical dependency counselor and has an ASIS certified provider with Mind Connection, providing addiction counseling and microcurrent feedback. Microcurrent neurofeedback is a natural, chemical-free, and painless way to help the brain heal for many conditions like addiction, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and more. She says helping parents and families recover from the devastating effects of substance use disorder is something Janelle feels compelled to do because she views her own family's recovery as an incredible gift. Together with their shared experience of trauma, substance use, denial, brokenness, fear, and also their healing journey, they strive to offer hope to the hopelessness and education for those who misunderstand addiction and who it actually affects. So we welcome Janelle and Reagan to our meeting.
All right, so I'll start. Just thank you for inviting us here. We really do appreciate every opportunity we get to share our story and our experience. And we really hope that through us sharing that that you will take something positive from it when we finish here tonight. And so Reagan and I are going to sort of tag team this. So I'm gonna let her start at the beginning, and then I'll jump in here and there and try to fill in kind of what my perspective and what was going on as a parent during the same time frame. So I'll let her start with basically her life, early life.
Okay,
Yeah.
so hi, I'm Reagan. So my parents got divorced when I was 3 years old, and I think at the time I didn't realize that that was going to affect me. But it did. And so for a while, we stayed living with my mom, and we would go, me and my older brother, he's 2 years older than me. We would go visit my dad every weekend, for roughly about 2 years or so, maybe a year. But for the time that I was, about 4 years old till around 6-ish, 5, every weekend that we would go over there, my dad was best friends with his neighbors. So we were always at the neighbor's house, and the neighbor's son would, sexually abuse me nearly every single weekend. And at the time I was really young, and it scared me, and I didn't know what to say or if I should say. I mean, that really wasn't a thought in my mind. So I immediately started suppressing that. And I was already feeling from a young age that my dad was somebody that I couldn't trust to protect me. And so kind of moving forward a little bit, by age 7, my dad just kind of up and moved to Illinois. And I don't really remember hearing much about it other than him coming to my mom's house, sitting us down and saying, "Hey, I'm leaving, I'm moving." And so, so that happened, and I didn't really understand it again at the time. I think I was still really young. But so still we were living with our mom, and we would go visit my dad every so often. And when I really noticed a switch was my mom got remarried around the time I was about 9 years old. And so it was almost like this bittersweet thing for me, because it was like I had a dad in the home now. But then that's when the real problems started happening as well. So my dad had always made it his mission growing up to make me and my brother hate our mom and want nothing to do with her, and always this picking side things. And so that's kind of when that started. And it was a lot more in my brother than it was in me, but he would still kind of force us to do those things. And so around the time that I was 9, visiting him, I started noticing that he would favor my brother a lot more than he did over me. And I remember one night that we were at his house, and we were eating dinner, and I had gotten a second plate of food, and he had made the comment that I was fat and that I shouldn't eat that second plate of food. So by that point, I really wanted his acceptance, and I really wanted him to love me. So I started trying to, restrict my eating. And so I was having this like borderline eating disorder going on from that age. And so kind of fast forwarding to when I was 13, is when things really started getting bad with the fighting, and just the choosing sides and all of that. So my brother was somebody that I thought, that's the one person I do have that I can trust. Like, he's my world, he's my best friend. I can't have anything to do with my mom or my stepdad because my dad will hate me, and I can't have anything to do with my dad because I just don't like it over there, and he's not really a good person. And so I was having this mental fight back and forth, and we had gone to see him again, and he had forced me and my brother to sit down in the living room and write down reasons why we hated our mom, and why we didn't want to be with her anymore. And I just remember I was sitting there for hours because I didn't have anything to write. I didn't have anything that I hated, but he just was, insisting. And so, that same year, kind of close to the time that happened, my dad had taken my mom to court to get custody of my brother. And he didn't want me, but the court wasn't going to split us up. So it was just kind of an, I guess you come with it. But it was for my brother. He just wanted my brother. And so, that they didn't follow through with it. So we stayed with our mom, and from that moment, I just I hit straight depression, because that kind of solidified all of these thoughts that I had as a little girl growing up, that my dad really didn't care about me, really just didn't love me. And, so once that happened, it made him really mad. And he, kept telling my brother all these lies, and the manipulation continued. And I was blamed for my brother not being able to live with him. And so that is initially what made that switch to my brother starting to hate me. And it was really, really hard for me, because like I said, at that time, I didn't feel like I could trust anybody but my brother. That was the one person that I had. And now that relationship was, walking on eggshells. And so, so it got really bad. And so kind of coming into high school, I started attention seeking, I was still struggling with the eating. And the only thing I had at this point is I was playing volleyball. I loved volleyball. That was my escape. And that's what I did. And so that's just what I used. My whole life revolved around it. And, so by high school, with the attention seeking with guys. I didn't have many friends in high school. A lot of them were really mean to me, or, thought I was a whore because I was attention seeking. And that kind of just totally made my brother hate me completely and turn against me. And he would say horrible things to me, and he would hit me. And he just wasn't nice. And so that by that point, I was absolutely crushed. And so by my sophomore year junior year, my brother had graduated, and he just up and left and went to move in with my dad. And that's really about when I started using, because, no matter what he did, he was still my person, and I was going to forgive him. But then he was gone, and, and I felt like I had absolutely nothing. So yeah, but that's a lot of years to cover. So as a parent, everything Reagan says is true. As a parent, we did not know about the sexual abuse. That didn't come out until rehab years later. So that was not something that we were aware of, or that I was aware of, and I'm sure her dad wasn't either. But it was pretty contentious, I will admit, in our home, and it was very unfortunate because I tried really hard to sort of try to balance out the ugliness that was there with my ex-husband, and with, we went to church. We went to church every weekend, every Sunday. I kept the kids busy. I let them see their dad as often as possible, even though he didn't live here. I didn't ever give him a hard time about flying them alone on an airplane. I did the best that I could. I feel like I did the best I could. I really did. It was very, very difficult. I knew what was going on. I knew a lot of what was happening, maybe not all the details, but I knew what was going on. I just was also powerless to stop it, because we did have a custody agreement. We did have a divorce decree that had all the stuff laid out, and there was very little I could do about protecting my children from what was going on without it being a huge ordeal. I tried to restrict their phones. He would call my son multiple times every day, and it was just so excessive and really, really disruptive to our family. And so I did restrict the phone calls through there's parental controls and things like that. And that just enraged him even more. And he would the things he would call me and say to them about me because of that. I'm not sure it made it better or worse. I don't know, but it was very clear to me that there wasn't a whole lot that I could do about it, but just try to keep things as normal as possible at home and stable. And so, the kids were busy. Both kids were in sports and activities. And with Reagan, she was a big volleyball player, indoor and beach, and we traveled all over the place, and we had a good time, I think, when we did these things, and it felt very good and normal. Did it really take, I don't know, did it really compensate? I don't know. I didn't know what else to do other than just to try to be above it and to just live the best we could. And so by the time the whole custody thing happened and being sued for custody, that was not a shock to me. I knew it was going to come at some point. It was an incredibly ugly and evil time in our household, and watching her heartbreak, which I did. I mean, she sat down in the bed, I'll never forget it, and said, "Why doesn't he love me like he loves my brother?" And I had no words for that. I don't know. I don't know why. And I don't know what to say. And it sucked. It just really sucked. So thankfully, the judge did not allow the kids to go. And that was good and bad, I guess, because it just went still downhill after that with just our relationships with my kids, my relationship with my kids, especially my son. And then the relationship between my children was absolutely decimated after that. And that was just heartbreaking because they were always
always close growing up. So, and I used to tell them, no matter what happens, you will always have each other, and then at that point, they really didn't. She didn't have him, and he didn't want anything to do with her. He was very angry. So he moved away. She was in a terrible depression after he moved away. And, we just kept going. We had school, we had volleyball, we had all the things. I thought, she just needs some time and she'll come out of it and it will be okay. And I think I believed that for a lot longer than I should have, actually. So because I saw her decline, probably starting the end of her junior year, maybe, and very quickly the first part of her senior year, for sure. So, and I was made aware of her drug use by a friend who she didn't think was a friend at the time. Thankfully, I think this friend probably ultimately saved Reagan's life. And because I don't think I would have ever believed what was going on had she not told me. And she actually sent me a photograph of my daughter using, which I can't tell you what that did to me. It was not on my radar, and I still have trouble even believing that it was true, even though I knew it was. So that was the start of her usage and how we got here today.
So yeah, during my junior year, that is when I smoked weed for the first time. And it's like, looking back on it now, I do think about, because, she did raise me right with, all these things follow and the church and everything that we did. And I was the type of kid that, like, if I knew that you were friends with somebody that did drugs, like, I was like, ew, you're a bad person. You can't talk to me. And I was so above it my entire life. And it was, through everything that had happened at such an early age for me, I got to the point where I really was like, who cares at this point? Like, really, who cares? And so I had smoked weed for the first time. And I think, mind you, too, around this time, me and my mom never had an ugly relationship, but definitely after, my brother leaving and stuff, we did start arguing a lot more. But I just couldn't deal. I couldn't deal at all. And so, when I used for the first time, it was like, well, this is awesome. I have all of my trauma and my problems just go away. I don't have them anymore. And so, it was awesome for me. I thought it was great. And, so I started hanging around the people that were smoking all the time, and, and that's what I was doing. And that's like all they did. And that for me lasted maybe, 2 weeks. And I'm starting to try, Xanax, and I'm starting to do acid, and I'm starting to, and so I'm already evolving pretty quickly. But needless to say, I was still, no matter what I was doing, I was smoking weed. And so by senior year, I was like on to bigger, better things, right? My group wasn't doing the hard stuff that I wanted to do. I wanted to try other things. I wanted to get more and more numb. And so, I ended up ditching them and finding an older group of friends, which, yeah, now I look at it and I'm like, that's really weird. You were 16 and they were all in their 20s, but, I was doing cocaine, and I'm, so I'm doing all these, hard drugs now. And I will say, too, which I don't even think this, but
Great.
but no, but there was a time, just being on the topic of weed and the kind of drug that is, I was also that type of kid. Am I using that was like, oh, it's natural, like it's no big deal. But, one, it very much was a gateway drug for me immediately. And two, there was a point in time where I did think that I was going in psychosis for a second there. And I don't know if that had to do with strictly the weed or the other. I mean, I was putting so much just toxicness in my body. But for a point in time, I did have to stop smoking because every time I would, it's like I was seeing things and it was freaking me out. But at the same time, I think, I cared a lot more about dying than I cared about that at that point. So it was also like, well, whatever, whatever gets me there quickest, that's what I'm going to do, I just had no desire to live whatsoever. And it was a constant. There was not a second of the day that I was sober at that point. I mean, I'm skipping school now, I'm showing up just, high, and I'm showing up to my job high. I'm quitting jobs. Like, I'm not even quitting. I don't even tell them I quit. I'm just not showing up anymore. And so, it quickly took a turn for me. Yeah. And I just think that's something that, typically it's a slow progression, but, for me, it was like night and day.
Yeah. And I would say that on my end, I could tell that things were going the wrong direction. I lived in denial, though. Still, thank God for my husband, because as a step parent, he had the really fun job of not being 100% the parent, but loving them as if he was their parent, and just that awkwardness that comes with it. But he was more objective about what was happening, and was careful about how he talked to me and how he would clue me in, and because I didn't receive it when he would say it, and but it turns out he was always right. He always kind of figured it out, and yeah, thankfully. But so that whole first semester of her senior year, it was as if the sun actually was setting and the darkness was enveloping her. She stopped caring about what she looked like. I don't think she washed her hair much. I don't think she combed it ever. Was always in a messy bun. She had the baggiest, drabbest clothes that you could possibly wear. And I used to tease her about, why do you have to look like a homeless person? You're so cute. And she was always tiny and athletic, and and that was the joke. And it's not funny to me anymore that I used to say that, because I was in denial about, I think, what was really happening. Like, how could this really be happening? She always had this light in her, and it was really all but gone by Christmas time of that year, which was, I guess, was 2017. So as luck would have it, just a few days after Christmas that year, she had begged me to spend the night with a friend, and I had said no, I think at least 10 times, and she had all these reasons why this was the best idea ever. And finally, I was like, fine, just go. And I don't care, just go. And so she did. And the next day, my husband and I were leaving. We were actually going to a basketball game in Austin, and we were supposed to leave in the early afternoon. And I had to get the oil changed in my car, which is really odd for me to do on this particular day. And so I went to get my oil changed. I had texted Reagan. She had told me where she was. And because she was supposed to be home that morning and she wasn't. And so as I was leaving my subdivision, I see Reagan's car, it's very easy to identify her car, but it was going the opposite direction of where she said she was. And it was just in that moment, I went out of the neighborhood and I followed her to her friend's house. So neither one of them were where they said they were. And I went to the front door. It was a big scene with the mom and the other girl, and it was horrible. And I told Reagan to go home. As soon as I get there, we're going to have a talk. And we did. And she had a flight to go visit her dad on January 1st. This would have been 3 days later. And so I put her dad on speakerphone and I told him what happened. And I said, when she gets on that plane, she's not coming home. I'm not doing this with her. We had talked about it the first time I caught her, and she promised to quit, and she obviously lied, and she had told me in that moment that she was not going to quit. And I said, you cannot live here. I'm not doing this. So given everything that had happened prior to that, my son had moved to live with his dad. And I think he was already he's in the service, he's in the Air Force. So he'd already been in the Air Force, but he hadn't spoke to me in 2 years at that point. I think maybe a year and a half, long time. So I lost one child to this man, and I'm about to send my second one to him because I'm not having her on drugs in my house. And you can imagine what that did to me. It still hurts to even say it out loud that I sent her to him, but I had no better option, I didn't think. And so I did, and I didn't tell anybody for a really long time. I couldn't even tell anybody. So I sent her there, and I tried to live my life, and everything was fabulous as far as I knew. She was thriving there, is what I was told. So then I thought I must have done the right thing.
So also a little backstory, because this was the second time she had caught me using, and the first time she did, I mean, I was pretty honest, and I just said, I'm very depressed, like I need help, I need this, I want a dog. And I really milked getting a dog. So I ended up getting a dog, and I still have her to this day. And I kind of used her as like my lifeline. Was like, I wasn't going to set out to end my life. And if it happened, whatever. But the reason why I wasn't going to act on my, suicidal thoughts was because I was like, I have this dog now, and this dog's the only thing in the world that truly loves me, and I can't leave this dog. And so, so I did have that, which we'll kind of get to a little later on. But so she caught me, and she told me, yep, you're not doing it here. You're going to go live at your dad's. And I thought, I was like, perfect, because he doesn't care about me and I don't care about him. So I'll live there. I'll do whatever I want, and we'll all be good, And so I was like kind of excited. I was like, great, I'll basically be on my own. And so, so I moved there, and it was immediately, he's just dad of the world, right? It just comes in, hey, let's hang out, let's go do this, and let's do this together. And I think with any kid, it would have been like, oh yeah, hang out with dad. But it really angered me. I mean, all of that resentment, everything I had been stuffing, because it all in some way connected to him, and it just enraged me, because I was like, I'm about to be 18 at this point, and you had, 17 years to be a father to me. Like, you don't get to just come back and, be dad of the year here. And so it really made me mad. And I just kept doing what I was doing at home, except, probably about 50 times worse with, my using. And I was very disrespectful. Every time he would say, you need to be home by 10, I would basically tell him F you, and I would walk out anyways. And I was doing whatever I wanted. I didn't care what he had to say. I was very, very mad. And so, he starts trying to put his foot down. And so, we're just butting heads to the max. We're starting to fight all the time. We're always yelling. I'm trying to run away. He's kicking my door down. It's a whole fiasco. And the whole time, she knows nothing of what's going on. But it was getting bad. That was the worst I had ever been. And it was like Reagan on drugs, but like psycho mode. And so there was this one in particular day, he took my car keys away, he took my phone away, like, you're going to and from school, I'm taking you, and, was trying to be really strict and all that stuff. We had gotten in a big fight the night or the day prior to that, I want to say. And it resulted in he came at me. So I started punching and kicking him. And then he kind of pinned me down on the floor, and he was screaming at me and saying, what's wrong with you? And that was like everything that this, 80-pound girl had been holding in since she was 3 years old. it all came out, and I just let him have, I mean, I was so angry. I was just crying hysterically. And it was like, you did this, you're the reason. You want to know why I'm like this? It's your fault. Like, you're the one that tore this family apart. You're the one that made your son suicidal. You're the one that did this to me. And I mean, and I just kind of totally let him have it. And that was like the first time I really ever saw any emotion in my dad whatsoever, because immediately his face went blank and he stopped talking immediately. And I saw the tears in his eyes, and he just didn't say anything, and he got up and he left, and I didn't see him again. I think for, at least the rest of that night.
Because he called me.
He did.
He called me crying. And I had no idea that anything was going on. And to hear him cry to me was an absolute shock. We didn't really speak much for many, many years. He refused to talk to me, in fact, for many years. So that was a shock for me. And that happened in March of 2018. And by then, I mean, he had moved to Arizona. So this is where this took place, was Arizona. And so at that point, I mean, he's describing this scenario that Reagan just described. And I'm in shock. I said, I don't know that girl. I've never experienced that with her. She's never been disrespectful really with us. I don't know. And he's like, I don't know what to do with her. She's running away. She hates me. She won't talk to me. Like, this whole thing went down. I said, okay. Then we need help. I can't have her. I don't know what to do with her. I have no way of fixing this. And so we just realized that we needed help. We needed help really badly. And he, wasn't super great at ever actually parenting or doing things for the kids. So it was up to me to figure out what to do. And I had no idea what I was doing, because I had never dealt with any substance use or anything like that. So, my good friend Google, and I tried to figure out what to do with my 17-year-old daughter, who had just had a major meltdown. And before that, she did shave her head too. So we have some really big cries for help. And we have a crisis situation, and I'm in Texas and she's in Arizona. And so I honestly just don't know how parents do anything with this without faith. Because I would have never found pathways without that, ever. I don't believe I would have. So Googling brought up pathway program in Arizona. It's about 2.5 hours from where she was living with her dad. And it was the only place I could get to even call me back. I called several. I Googled, I don't know how many million times in the middle of the night. I don't think I slept for a couple of days, just trying to figure out what to do with her and how to help her. And oh my goodness. So when I did call Pathway, it's a program like Cornerstone of Houston. It's for teens and adolescents. And they promised me that if we could get her there, they would keep her. And this was a place that I couldn't go to. I couldn't see it for myself. I had to trust. I had to figure out if I could trust them, how to trust them, and then actually trust them, and then trust her dad to get her there, and that he would tell me the truth about the place, because I had no other way of knowing whether that was going to be okay or not. So it was probably one of the most terrifying times of my life, and thank God it ended up working out that he took her and she wanted to stay.
So it was a very awkward, 3-hour car ride. We didn't talk at all. I was so mad at him. I wanted nothing to do with him. And so, we got there and I got out and I'm sitting in this office and all these kids just start running up to me, hugging me, telling me they love me, asking me what my name is. And, you know, so first glance, I'm like, the girls were trying to get me, hey, stay the weekend with us, you know, don't go back with your dad, come stay with us and stuff. And so immediately in my mind, I'm like, wow, all these people are so gullible. I'll be able to do whatever I want here. And so I made the girls go talk to my dad and tell him that I was not leaving with him. I'm staying here because I thought, you know, wow, I can fool everybody here, you know, like everybody's so like rainbows, you know, so it's easy. And so I stayed the weekend. And I was having this fight with myself because I didn't want to deal with any of my trauma and I wanted to continue using because that's the only thing that made me feel happy. But I also was falling in love with this place at the same time and the people there. And so, you know, I'll never forget initially meeting with the head counselor and him telling me you're going to what they call step 2. It's our 45-day inpatient program. It's where, you know, the worst of the worst goes, and that's you. So you're going there for your first day and all of that. So I was like, okay, you know, whatever. And I go there and they tell you, you know, it's heaven on earth and it's this and it's amazing. And it was, you know, I would give everything to go back there. Like it was the best place ever. And I was living in this house with 7 other people. I had a full house the whole time. And, you know, counselors stay, we have night counselors, day counselors, and, you know, we're playing games, we're doing fun things, we're, you know, flipping the couches over and having Nerf wars. And, you know, we're doing all these things while learning about recovery and having a serious side of, you know, our meetings and having a sponsor and getting treatment plannings. We did intensive inpatient for 6 hours, Monday through Friday. And so I loved it there. And it was hard for me too. I'll never forget, you know, about 2 weeks into the program is when I really started to let it all in. My counselor that day in inpatient had been digging at me, you know, with those sore spots, getting me to talk and getting me to open up. And I just remember from about noon that day, I was bawling my eyes out so hard I couldn't speak till about 3 a.m., you know. And so all of that, we finished outpatient and we took the van, we went back home, and I'm just crying the entire time. And I was sitting in our living room. And the whole house was sitting around me, the counselors too. And we had 2 new people as well that probably didn't even remember my name at that point. But I remember because they're all sitting with me and I'm just crying and crying and crying. And they waited until finally I was able to talk. And I just shared my life story and I shared everything that I had been through and everything that I'd been holding on to. And that was the first time that I felt like I was genuinely loved by anybody. And my favorite day, that was my favorite day being there. And so, you know, after that, I really started opening up and eventually, you know, my 45 days was up. So I had to leave the house. And so I did. I moved in with one of the girls in the group, her and her family. And I, you know, did another thing of outpatient. And I think that was for 4 hours, Monday through Friday. Something, I don't even remember now, but something like that. And that was for an additional 6 weeks. I want to 8 weeks.
Mhm.
Yeah, 8 weeks. For an additional 8 weeks. And that change was really hard for me. Again, I started struggling because it's like I finally had this home of people. I knew I was loved there. I knew I could be good there. And then I had to leave it. And I wasn't there anymore. And I just didn't do good with that. I had so much abandonment I felt to work through and, you know, feeling like I wasn't good enough, feeling like I was unlovable or like I was the forgotten child. I didn't do good with change. And so, you know, immediately I start shelling back into using me, you know, not wanting to open up, not wanting to speak out, and, you know, just wanting to do the wrong things because I didn't know what else to do. And so, you know, I kind of BS'd my way through outpatient, not even gonna lie. And then I did 6 months of aftercare, and that was meeting, I think, like every other week or something like that. And, and I definitely had some slip ups. We had the sketch squad and I was always a part of it, and, hanging out with the non-winners in the group. And it was really, really difficult for me. But eventually I moved up. They had a younger group and an older group. So I turned 18, I moved up to the older group, and finally it seemed like I started doing better again. And I started getting it. I had my core group of friends that, really loved me and always took care of me and had my back. And so I really leaned into that. So yeah, that's
My
your turn.
So Reagan's at Pathway, and I don't know what that means for me at all, but I feel like she's in a safe place and I can breathe now because she was in their inpatient program and she didn't have a phone or anything. And, at that point, I didn't care. I just wanted help, and I needed them to fix her because there was a whole lot going on that wasn't right. And, but I quickly learned that's not how it works, and that I had some work to do as well. And the counselors there were very gentle with me because I was very clueless. And I'm the first to admit that I probably made them laugh a lot by a lot of the crap that I said, because I was all very rosy. Everything was going to be fine. She's right where she needed to be. And then we were all going to go back to normal. And that has never happened. And it's never going to happen even now, 4 years later. So they recommended some books to read, and they have a parent program. So I was able to, even though I was in Texas, I had a mom, they connected me with other moms, and that was life-saving for me. Just to hear other people's experiences and connect with people who understand that. I can't imagine trying to do this without that. So they connected me. This was back before they had video. I don't know if Zoom was a thing then, but they didn't have it. I don't know if I was the first one out of state to want to participate in parent meetings, but one of the moms would put me on speakerphone and just set the phone in the middle of the room, and I got to participate that way. And I don't think I missed one meeting. I couldn't live without that. And then I learned about the 12 steps, and I decided, I don't know anything about the 12 steps, but my daughter's learning about that. So how do I talk to her if I don't know anything about that? So I got a sponsor and I started working the steps, and I found that the steps are incredibly amazing and they can apply to anything in your life, just about. And I read all the books, and then I probably read 20 more, everything I could get my hands on so that I could learn about what was really happening, and just immersed myself in it. And when I did that, I will say that the relationship between us grew tremendously. We became very close. I would go visit her. I would have girl weekends with her. I probably did that 3 or 4 times. And I would take her shopping, and we would just hang out, and we would talk about a lot of the things we had never been able to talk about. And just sort of apologize too for my part in some of it where I couldn't protect her, and I wish I could have. That maybe if she thought there was something I could have done, I would have done it. And we had those kind of conversations too. So, and she's very gracious to me. She's never held anything against me, which is really cool. And I've been able to be okay with that. So when she decided to come home, after being there about 10 months, I was all about it. I couldn't wait to have her come home. And I would have said at the time, she is fixed. I was still, I'd done a lot, but I really wasn't 100% there. But I was excited that she wanted to come home, and I really missed her. And everything was great for about, 3 weeks. And then she relapsed. So,
thinking back at the time, I didn't have anything premeditated of, I'm going to go back home and I'm just going to use, my intention at the time really was to stay sober. It's like, I finally found this happiness that I had never had before, like all growing up. Nothing ever made me happy. My life sucked. I didn't have anything to be happy for. And I finally found something that, made my life worthwhile. But I missed her, and I hated that, I was getting older. I'm 18 at this point, and I just felt our relationship was robbed, for so long. And I wanted to be close, I wanted to have my mom back that I felt like I could never have. So, we moved back, or not we, I moved, I moved
you.
I moved back. But I think we both, did not understand, how the support aspect of the program is so important, and so crucial, because I will say, the whole time I learned so many great things, and it did, turn me into a totally different person, but I still wasn't sold that, like, my name's Reagan and I am an addict. I still had trouble with that because, in my mind, there was a lot of blame. It was easy to blame my using on everything that happened in my life. It was easy to victimize myself in that and say, well, my dad did, A all the way to Z, and that's why I used. If he wouldn't have done that, I would have been happy. I would have been fine. And so, missing that support, at the time too, right after I had moved back, a lot of my really close friends at the Pathway program started relapsing, and that was breaking my heart. And so I finally thought it was a good idea. And I said, you know what? Like, yeah, I'm not sold I'm an addict. So I'm just going to smoke weed, and I'm going to do it manageably because I've dealt with my problems now. So I should be, according to my theory, that should work. And so I tried it, and it lasted 3 days, and I was back on everything and more. And, I was doing fentanyl, and I mean, just led me into absolutely everything else. And it was heartbreaking. And I also, remember I had told her at this point, we had grown our relationship so much. So I came to her, I said, listen, I'm going to use, and I respect your rules. So I'm packing my stuff and I'm leaving the house. And she made me take my dog with me. And so I have my dog with me. I left the house. My using is just out of control. And I'm throwing up blood every night. I'm just passed out. I mean, I'm almost dead at this point. And I think, thinking back now, this is why I bring up the dog, is because the most heartbreaking thing and what really sold me at this point that I really am an addict was because my dog was the one thing that I loved more than anything else. The only thing I thought that loved me. And it still breaks my heart to this day, but I don't remember her. I don't know if she got fed. I don't know if she got taken out. I don't know how she ended up back home with me. Once I came back from my relapse, I don't remember her at all. And that shatters me that, clearly I'm powerless over these substances, because the thing that I love the most, I don't care about at all when I'm under the influence. And I'll never forget it. I mean, it was the worst experience ever, but it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And I called her the morning of March 15th in 2019. I woke up that day and I was 2 hours away from home. Some house, I don't even know whose house or who I was really with. I knew one person that was there, and they were all going to go get more drugs. They offered me to go, and I said, no, I'll stay here. And they all left, and I was looking around this just disgusting house, bottles everywhere, pills everywhere. I mean, you name it, it was there. And immediately I called my mom. She didn't answer at first. And so I felt very defeated. She called me back, and immediately I, like, just tears in my eyes, pleading. I've already looked up places that I can go. I want to be sober. Like, you don't have to take me back home, but like, these are the places that I looked at, and I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't the life that I want to live. And so,
Yeah. So she came to me, it was one night in February where she decided she wanted to not be sober anymore. And I couldn't believe it. I will think just that I had worked my own recovery program. So I knew that there was no arguing with her at that point. I mean, I tried a little bit, maybe kind of like, because I didn't really understand. I couldn't really comprehend this is what we're doing now. You've been in treatment for 10 months and you come home and you're going to go use. Like, I just couldn't really wrap my head around it. But at the same time, she was 18 and she needed to figure it out. I couldn't figure it out for her. I couldn't make her be any sort of way. It was devastating, absolutely devastating. But I did make her take her dog because I kind of, number one, it's her dog and it's her responsibility. But number two, I kind of thought, well, if anything, she'll have something to take care of and maybe that will help. But for about 3 weeks, we didn't have a conversation. I would send her an I love you here and there, maybe 2-3 times tops. It wasn't much. And I didn't ask her any questions ever because part of me didn't want to know. And the other part was I knew that I didn't need to ask her any questions. When she was ready, or if she ever got ready, then she would know that I was here and that she could come home, or that she could at least call and tell me. And it was excruciating, 3 weeks of having no idea where she was, what she was doing, what was happening to her. If she was alive, just try not to think about it. But I swear it seemed like every day was, a year. It just was horrible. I'd cry going to work every day and cry all the way home. And, just really, really, really hard. But I do believe that because of Pathway and the help that I got and the program that I was working, that what I did maybe saved her life. Not chasing her, not trying to force her to be sober or come home, or, to use, you can smoke pot in the house, just don't leave. None of that would have been good. Yes, I risked, something horrible happening to her, but I think it ended more quickly than it would have had I chased her down. So I knew I just had to let her go. And most of my friends, I will tell you, did not understand that at all. And so my friend group has very much changed through this experience. I don't feel like a lot of my old friends really can understand or relate to everything that has happened in my life. And I'm not very big on superficial relationships. I want to have deep relationships and people I can really talk to about really like deep things, important things. And so I look for different things now in people. And but when she called me on March 15th, I did miss the call. I had gotten to work and I was doing something and I missed the call, and I knew it was her. She had a special ringtone on my phone, she still does. And so I knew it was her, but I couldn't get to the phone. And it was like, my heart was going to explode because you don't know if that's good or bad. She hadn't called me in over 3 weeks. So of course I called her back. And the first thing she said was, Mom, I want to be sober. And I said, come home, just come home. We'll figure this out. And that's all. That was just music to my ears. So she did come home, and we kind of went through our options of, does she need treatment? What does that look like? What needs to happen? And we just went to work finding local support here. And we were lucky that we did find it. And she didn't really need to go back to rehab. She just needed to learn how to use her tools and to find support, physical support here where she's located. So we did that, and that seemed to be the beginning of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I just started going to AA meetings, and being very involved with, the 12-step program, getting a sponsor. I think for a while I hit meetings almost every day, if not every day. And I was really working hard, because, at that point I knew that I needed to do something. I needed to put some work in. I needed to change something. Otherwise, this was going to be my life. I was going to wake up dead. I knew that, if my relapse would have lasted any longer, I would be dead, and I know that, if I chose today to go back out, I wouldn't have the option to say, no, you know what, I want to try that sobriety thing again. Because, I get sucked in so fast. And so immediately, yeah, that's what we did. And I still, I still had a lot of trauma to work through, a lot of things to work through. And, fear is one of them. A lot of everything for me would stem from fear. But it took, a push or two from her, but I did eventually get my GED. I think that's the one thing we hadn't mentioned is, I dropped out of my senior year multiple times. So I finally got my GED, and that was so exciting. And at this point, I was still trying to have a relationship with my brother. And it was at this point, he would come to me and he would apologize for how he treated me. And then he would continue treating me that way and then come back and apologize. And that was kind of the cycle. And I'll never forget it, because I was sitting by the pool, and I didn't even think that I don't even think you wanted to tell me what had happened, but we were talking about my brother. And at this point, he was kind of contacting her a little bit too. And so she started telling him, hey, Reagan's sober again, and she got her GED. And if you want her graduation letter, like send me your address and all of that stuff. And he replied and said, I don't think I can, or if I cared, I'd ask. That's what he said.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. And that to me was, just knife to the heart once again. But I knew I wasn't going to go back to who I was over it, as painful as it was. And so I did. I wrote him a letter and I said, listen, I'm not doing this anymore. You've hurt me over and over and over again, amongst all the other people that have hurt me over and over again, and I can't do it anymore. So, if you want a relationship with me, this is what I need. And if you can't give that, then I'm not willing to do this with you anymore. And immediately he blocked me on everything. Still blocked, I'm pretty sure. We still haven't talked to this day. That was like summertime.
Yeah.
So, but life goes on. I was tired of giving all my power to my brother and my dad. I was tired of letting them run my life completely. And so, so I went to beauty school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I hate beauty school, but I went there, and I got licensed to be an eyelash technician and hated that so much more. But it's like, I did it, I started accomplishing these things. And so after that, I started getting involved with this one recovery program, and I let the head counselor there convince me to become a recovery coach and take that class. So I did, and I was certified. And that's when I really found that this is what I need to be doing. I need to be helping other people like me. I spent so long, of my life. I believed in God. I knew he was real, but I didn't know why he hated me and why he made this my life. And it was, for the first time now, years later, I was finally getting this glimpse of, God wasn't punishing me. He wanted me to help other people. And so I started going to college to become a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and I'm almost there, but I'm getting closer. But I started doing that, and fast forwarding up to about beginning of last year, I was still having connection with my dad, and it was still the same treatment, the same things. And so finally I cut that relationship off and I started doing trauma therapy. And months and months went by up until September. He was trying to kind of get back in my life. He would make these like childish pokes to see if I was upset with him. And if I wasn't, then he would come in my life and then do something horrible. And then since I'd be upset, he would leave again and then kind of make these childish pokes after time went by. And I was done with it. I was really done with it. That was around my birthday, and I was over it. So I wrote him, a letter basically stating the same thing that I told my brother a couple years prior, was that, this relationship is very unappealing to me. This is what I'm needing. If you don't want to do that, I totally respect that. Just let me know. And he ended up replying, and it was blame game to the max. You're doing this, you do this, and yeah, just no ownership whatsoever. And so I finally just said, well, then if you're ever ready, let me know, but I'm not doing this with you anymore. And we haven't had communication since. And right after that, I got my 2 years sober. And then I started working at Cornerstone, the adolescent recovery program that I'm still currently working at, and I love it there. And we just continue to share our story. And I'm getting closer to the license. I mean, I've never felt better. My whole life and every aspect is just enveloped with recovery at this point, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, I love it. I love it so much. I didn't think happiness, I thought that was made up. I didn't think when I heard happiness or people being happy, I didn't think that it was a real thing. And, and I finally really found it. And I'm just really, really grateful now, for my life and, in our relationship too.
Yeah, it's been a really wonderful 3 years. Well, the first year or so of her after her relapse was it was a little rough. Like she said, she was very fearful of doing a lot of things and didn't have a lot of confidence in herself. And sometimes I had to push a little more than I wanted to, because I had fear too that I would push too hard and something bad would happen. But once she started to accomplish things, it really sort of set that ball in motion. And it just seemed like now it's like one thing after another, like nothing's slowing her down right now. And she just moved out last week into her own apartment for the first time. Like, I didn't kick her out this time. She actually moved out, and it was a happy thing. And I haven't been sad about it at all. I'm just so excited watching her, knowing where she started, and then how she got here. There's a whole lot in there. There's lifetimes in there that grown adults like my age haven't lived. And I watch her and think it just amazes me that she's made it, and that she is who she is, and she's doing all these things. And it's changed my life. I mean, I'm a counselor and I do microcurrent neurofeedback, and I'm getting my master's degree right now. I'm all in it too. And part of our dream, it's maybe not our whole dream, but part of our dream is really to work together, helping families. She's got the addict part down. I've got the family part down pretty much. And, and maybe we can make a little dent in the world. And because the family needs help too. The family needs help as much as the person who's struggling with substance use disorder. And so it's my goal to get people to understand that if you can get well, you can really impact the wellness of your loved one who's struggling. And so that's my mission.
How does addiction affect the whole family?
I will say one thing, there's always, like you said, there's always growth, and there's always, you're never like at the end. So, our family is still very, very broken. My son hasn't talked to either one of us in almost 3 years. And that is still heartbreaking. And we hold out hope that someday that will change somehow. Her dad, of course, hadn't really talked to me much, but her relationship with her dad is also broken. So, we still would like to see some restoration there. I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know how it happens, but that's still our reality right now.
And I will say, I think with that being the hope, I think I more so have that with my brother now. I think there's always going to be that part of me that wants my best friend back, and wants him to get better. But I will say, deciding not to continue having a relationship with my father was really hard, but was one of the best things I've ever done for myself. Because I think too, I know I mentioned him earlier, but my poor stepdad, who, I mean, gosh, just got punched and kicked and thrown up on, since he's been in my life. And but since being able to cut those ties with my dad, it's like I finally was able to give myself permission to really acknowledge all the amazing things that, that I did have. Maybe he's not my biological father, but he's the best dad that I've ever had, and the only one that I would ever ask to have. And so, our relationship has gotten so much closer. And, I think that's one of the things that I'm grateful the most, especially right now in my life. I never felt like I was able to love him the way that I wanted to. And now I finally am, and it's just, it's really, he texted me last week and told me he missed me because I moved out. So, but, and so I think with those things, because at first when you hear it, it is really hard and it's shocking to people. How do you get through it? And oh my gosh, but we've had so many little wins or, things like that, definitely keep me going. Even though I have that other stuff going on too.
How do you get people or a family to stay with a recovery program even after treatment, or prepare for somebody coming home from treatment?
I think one thing is, coming from a more educational side of it, or when you're really in AA, you'll hear a lot of times, like the drugs are the symptom, right? I'm the problem. And I think that just kind of really goes to show, because it does take you completely over, and I think, especially for me in the life that I've lived, I would really just encourage, just give it a shot. And if you hate it, don't come back. If you hate it, leave. But if you love it, then stay. If you find happiness, if there is a change, then stay, because you're going to save yourself so much heartbreak. I could have saved myself so much heartbreak, because I will say, part of the reason why I didn't come back and tell her that I wanted to be sober sooner was because of the guilt that I felt of now building our relationship and then ripping it away. And same with, all the relationships that I had made in recovery. It killed me. And so, I think gratitude, think about what you have and have gratitude for it. Because the reality is, if you do go back out, you may not have a chance to tell those people how grateful you are. That could very well be the end. So I think, put your pride aside and give it a shot. And if you don't like it, that's fine. But if you do, then we'd love to have you here.
And, as a parent, you feel like you've done something wrong. At some point, you feel like you've done something wrong. And some parents have, and they played a role. And some people are oblivious, and they're trying to help their children. And these parents, how do you help them cope? What do you do?
With the ones that think that they've done something wrong, or that they're
and they're blaming themselves the whole time and enabling, and they can't get out of that cycle.
There's a lot of parents that come to Al-Anon or even PAL or any of the meetings that feel that way. And one of the first things that we're taught is that we didn't cause it. And what is it? We didn't cause it. We can't cure it.
Right.
and all of that. So that's the first thing, but that's a process. So you can tell somebody that all day long. They don't take that to heart immediately. So that's why we say you keep coming back. You don't go to one meeting and that's all you need. I
know.
still go to meetings. I lead meetings now. There's a lot to learning about addiction, how it's caused, what it means, that it's a disease, that we can feed the problem or we can be a part of the solution, and we learn tools and ways to be a part of the solution, or at least find a way to live our own life regardless of the choices of our loved one. Our goal is to have a joyful, I'm still here for a reason, and so are you as parents, regardless of whether Reagan stays sober or not. So part of it is separating ourselves from our children in a loving way, not in a,
Right.
we don't
That's
care about you
difficult.
kind of way. It is, and not basing our worth on the success or failure of our children, because we're not
Correct.
responsible for those things. We think we are, a lot of us think we are, but we're not, because they get to make their own decisions and their
But
life.
when you feel like you give up like that, you feel like you are a failure in some ways. And a lot of parents do, and they struggle with it.
I think, yeah. And I think that's why they keep coming back and talking to other parents, so that they
Okay.
can have that support and people that understand and that don't judge them and are not blaming them because it isn't their fault. And the more you hear that and the more you understand that, the more you can acquiesce to it, that maybe it wasn't all me. Maybe I did do the best that I could do. Maybe I had some really crappy choices to make, and I made the best choice of the crappy choices I had. And I just have to look back and be okay with doing that. And, hindsight's always 2020. I can look back and go, well, gosh, maybe I should have done that differently, but I can't go back and change that.
I think it's one thing too is, for a long time, I did blame my family, and I thought that they were the sole purpose of me using, because if I wouldn't have had all this happen, I wouldn't have gotten into it, or, whatever it is. And I think, I could say that was, the truth, maybe the first few times that I picked up, but I mean, being in active addiction, it's like, it's only a choice until it's not anymore, right? The first few times it was a choice for me, and in my family stuff, that was easy to hide behind, right?
Exactly.
Because I was really depressed. But, after those few times, I mean, I just don't think people understand how consuming, the drug really is, because after those 2-3 first times, it wasn't a choice for me anymore. It was life or death. I had to, there wasn't even a thought that would go into my mind of, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll use today. Like I need it and I have it, and I have to do it right now. And, and I have to stay this way. And I think that's one thing too, that, you don't get to hear that from your kid, sadly, but it's like, I've been able to, I know that now, and I've been able to tell, her that and stuff, and kind of share that to other parents in the program, because I mean, that's just the best way that I can describe, it's not you. It's not your fault. Sure, I can play victim and I can use that as an excuse the first couple times, but after that, it's no longer me, I'm not there.
I think that's where I'm going with that. It's not always the parents' fault. And, we can look back in all this, and when you relapsed and came home, and I don't know if you're still recording, if people really care to hear about this or not. But, when you first came home, we had a conversation, Reagan. You're not going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do that. Well, in my mind, I always thought, well, there's always the opportunity for you to find friends and do stuff and whatever. So I was always on the lookout, maybe more so than your mom, because she was very, very trusting of you. Me, I was focused. I focused on you a little bit. I watched your actions. If I saw something weird, like smoking on the, you know, on the ceiling, on the roof, to me, that's a signal that you're trying to hide something. And so we might want to look at that. So I need to tell your mom or not, or address it with you. And we addressed it ourselves. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think it's just, it's not the parents' fault, but the parents also have their obligation to pay attention as well. But just love your kids. Just love your kids. That's it.
I think, it's a two-way street too, because I did notice that at times, but it's also like, it would be the same thing of where I would feel sometimes she would be micromanaging me, and we would be able to have a conversation about it, but whether I got annoyed with it or not, I still had to take a step back and realize the damage that I had caused to the family and the trust that I had broken. And so, fair enough, if you're going to watch over my shoulder, I deserve it,
But you're 18.
This is what I was doing. These were my actions. I was stealing, I was lying. I was not a good person. So, I think, and eventually, people who are in recovery do come around to that. But I did. It's a two-way street. Trust isn't easy to build, especially once it's broken. And so that's where, I still needed to take a step back and look at myself, well, where have I been deceitful? I've done all of these things. So, if she is going to micromanage me, I can probably let it slide, because I wasn't the best kid. I didn't make the best choices.
Thank you, Janelle and Reagan, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope with the Every Brain Matters community. And we'll see you next time to promote more healing and growth.